Hello, everyone. I'm Kathy from House of TOEFL. And today we are going to be tackling speaking question 3 on the TOEFL speaking test. This lesson will be advanced, so I will be speaking a little bit faster. If you wish, I do have other videos about this, but I recommend trying this video because I'm going to speak at the pace of the TOEFL lectures. Now, you can always slow down the pace of the video, and YouTube does have a feature to do that, but try to keep up with what I'm saying. It's good practice. Now, my goal is for the end of this video, you will have everything you need to know to answer prompt number 3. Now, the ETS calls this the general to specific task, but I don't. I call it the definition example task. I've been calling it that for 10 years. Because it's literally a definition on the screen and then an example given by a professor. So to me, that's a clear title of what to call this. So I call it the definition example task, and you will see why. So first, let's go over some basics. First of all, as you probably know, this is considered an integrated question. Integrated simply means that two things are blended together. There are different sources of information that you use to give your response. And this simply differentiates it from question 1. Question 1 is an independent question. So the first thing you will see on the screen is a definition of a concept. The definition will use academic language. This is where strong vocabulary is important. It's very difficult if you don't understand the definition. Obviously, it's difficult for you to repeat it. So again, vocabulary is important. It's about 100 words and there is a title at the top. You will be given 45 to 50 seconds to read this definition and take notes. You must use the definition in your response to get a full score, and your notes are imperative. Please do not try not to take notes. In other words, take notes. Yes, your notes are very important. So what can you expect? Well, the first thing you will see on the screen is a definition. Again, it's about 100 words and there's a title at the top. The definitions have an enormous range of topics. They could be defining something about art, biology, plant, animal behavior, film, marketing, and many more topics. So really, again, a range of vocabulary is very important. So you'll see this reading for 45 to 50 seconds, 50 seconds if it's a longer one. Most of the time you'll have 45 seconds. There will be a timer that will count down from 45. Try not to let it panic you. Try to just take down a few sentences, and I'll get to that in a moment. But you must know this definition will disappear. It will not return. So you want to write down the title and at least 2 sentences from it. And we'll talk more about that shortly. Next, you will listen to a brief lecture from a professor, and a picture of the professor will appear on the screen. This picture will not help you. It's just a still photograph of a professor talking to a class. There's no information there for you to use. The lecture is about 1.5 minutes. The lecture will give a specific example of the definition. Sometimes there are actually 2 examples, and we will do one today that has 2 examples. Usually it's 1 example. Now, please note, again, the reading does not return to the screen. I get that question a lot. No, it does not return to the screen. You have 30 seconds to prepare your answer for this task, and you have 60 seconds to speak for this task. Okay, now this is a good place to pause the video and read this. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to read warning coloration and you have an idea of what it is. This is a very typical definition that you will see on the TOEFL. Now, just a couple things to point out here. I want to point out that the first sentence is often not very important. This says a lot of animals have colors on their body that actually help to protect them from predators. But that's not our definition. That's just a general statement. And I see that a lot on the TOEFL. So I'm not saying skip the first sentence. I think you should read it. But it's not usually where your definition is going to be. However, if you look down a little further, you see the sentence, this is called warning coloration. So that sentence, because it has this, indicates that a good part of the definition will be in the sentence before. And in fact, it is. Warning coloration, it's important to note it's a distinct coloration. It signals predators as a defense. It would harm the predator if it attacks the animal. Furthermore, and I'm going to repeat this, it's so important, the last sentence also has something important almost all the time on the TOEFL, 99% of the time. It will attach to something in the reading, it will connect. So here it says, predators learn to associate the warning coloration with the negative consequences of attacking the animal and will avoid it. And as you will hear in the lecture, this does connect with something in the lecture. So that's the least you want to write down. If you should try to write down more, but at least those two sentences. And we're going to go over that a little bit more about notes here. So first, write down the title. Now, the title will be in the prompt, but you're going to read your notes in the order they appear, most likely, if you're like most students. So having that title at the top shows you where to start. I always write down the title. Then look for sentences that contain important parts of the definition. And we just talked about that. I have another video that I made a while back about how to find the important sentences. So feel free to find that video. It's in my channel. And I go into great detail about that. Then write down keywords. Don't try to write down whole sentences. It won't work. It's too time consuming. But let's take an example. Let's look at this sentence. Predators learn to associate the warning coloration with the negative consequence of attacking this animal and will avoid attacking it. You can shorten this, and I've shortened it here. Predators learn to associate warning coloration with / neg consequent, avoid attack. These are enough for me to understand when I read it, okay? Now, would I understand that if you handed it to me in 6 months? No, I probably wouldn't. Your notes will be choppy. They will be difficult for you to understand later. But since it's fresh in my memory, it will be easy for me to reconstruct that. So find a way of taking notes that works for you. The most important thing is you understand your own notes. There are many YouTube videos about how to take notes. So feel free to look on YouTube. I will probably make one in the future. And there's many articles about it on Google as well. Now, as I said earlier, take note of the last sentence of the definition. There's usually something important that connects with the lecture in the last sentence. And here are my sample notes. You can pause the video if you want to take a look or rewind the video and compare that with the definition. But basically, I've written the most important points here. There's distinct colors, that signals to predators that they would harm the animal. If the predator doesn't recognize it and attacks, it will suffer. Predators learn to associate warning coloration with negative consequences to avoid attack. So it makes sense to me when I go to reread it. I can definitely reconstruct that. Okay, I actually have a recording of this that I'm going to play for you now. Now, please note you will not see the audio script when you're actually in the TOEFL, but for the purposes of today's lecture, just to make it a little easier for you, I went ahead and I put it on the screen. So here's the recording.
Now listen to a lecture in a biology class. Let's look at a few examples. One you've probably seen is the monarch butterfly. Its wings feature a black and orange pattern that is easy to recognize. Monarch butterflies contain toxins they derive from the milkweed plants they eat. These toxins make birds that mistakenly eat them very ill. After that experience, the bird will learn to avoid any butterflies that are orange and black because it doesn't want to get sick again. A second example is the honey badger. They are small, furry animals that live in Africa and have black bodies with a white stripe down their backs, so they are very easy to spot and very easy to recognize. Honey badgers are very aggressive and they have very long claws. They also have sharp teeth and will defend themselves ferociously. If an animal, say a lion for example, tries to attack the honey badger, it will fight back by biting and scratching the lion and possibly injuring it. The lion learns to associate a black body with a white stripe down its back with an animal that is aggressive and can hurt it, and a lion will stay far away the next time it sees a honey badger.
Okay. Now, these are my sample notes, and again, these make sense to me. But again, in 6 months, they won't make sense to me. But since I just heard the lecture, I can definitely understand what they say. I know, for example, O/B means orange and black. Easy to spot plus recognize means easy to spot and recognize. And I can reconstruct this into my response. You can pause the video if you'd like to take a look at these notes. Now, let's go to the sample prompt and the sample response. So the prompt will be something like this. Using the example of the monarch butterfly and the honey badger, explain warning coloration. Now, I want to take a moment and explain something. Here, the prompt gave me the names of the animals, monarch butterfly and honey badger. But if it's a more common animal, a dog, a cat, a zebra, a giraffe, an animal that a child would know, they will not give you the animal name. They will just say, using the example from the lecture, explain blank, explain whatever it is. So that's why it's actually important to learn a lot about animals. And it might sound silly, but it will really help you to know your animals. That also applies, of course, to the listening and the reading section as well, which are very heavily dependent on stories about animals, information about animals. So this would be my sample response. I'm not going to time this, but it should take about a minute. According to the lecture, warning coloration is when animals have distinct colors that signal to predators they are able to harm the animal. If the predator doesn't recognize the color and attacks, it will suffer, so it learns to associate the warning color with a negative consequence and avoids attacking it. The professor gives 2 examples to illustrate this. One is the monarch butterfly. They have orange and black wings that are easy to recognize. They contain toxins from milkweed plants that make birds very sick if they eat them. Birds will avoid eating orange and black butterflies to avoid getting sick again. Another example is the honey badger. They are small furry animals that live in Africa and have a black body with a white stripe, so they're easy to spot and easy to recognize. They are very aggressive and have long claws and sharp teeth to defend themselves. If a lion attacks it, the honey badger will scratch and bite the lion, so the lion will associate black and white stripes with an animal that can hurt it and stay far away. Now, I bet you're thinking, wow, that's so fast. That's right, because I only have a minute to convey a definition and a lecture that was a minute and a half. So I have to pick up the speed. I have to go faster. You don't have a choice. Students tell me, I can't do that. You can, you just have to practice and practice and practice. All right, moving on. Now, many students do want a template, and I understand that. I just have to warn you, a template doesn't guarantee a good score, but it has advantages. It can give you a structure. So I prefer to say, okay, let's look at some useful phrases. So here are some useful phrases you can use. You can start with the reading defines, or according to the reading, and then the title is, or just the title, like camouflage is, and so forth. Then as you move to the lecture, you can say the professor gives the example of, the professor illustrates this with the example of, or the professor gives 2 examples of this, and so on. Now at the end, you may conclude if you have time. It's not going to affect your score too much, but if you have 9 or 2 seconds left, it's a good idea. You can say something like, that's why Y is a good example of, like, that's why the monarch butterfly and the honey badger are good examples of warning coloration. Therefore, X is a good illustration of, and then title of the reading, or simply, this is an example of, title of the reading. This is an example of warning coloration. Of course, that's the easiest conclusion. Okay, just a few do's and don'ts. Do summarize the reading, don't ignore the reading, please. Some people skip the reading and just say, the professor gives an example of, and then give the title, and then start talking about the lecture without giving any content from the reading. Don't do that. That's a mistake. So summarize the reading. You want to spend about 12 to 15 seconds on it. If you go a little over that, it's okay. Don't go more than 20 seconds on that. Cite your sources. What I mean by that is say, Something like according to the reading and then according to the lecture. Citing your sources is important in TOEFL. Clearly transition to the lecture by stating the professor gives an example of. And make sure your subjects and verbs agree. Now, what am I talking about? Look here. The professor gives. Every day, I hear a student say the professor give. I hear it every day. Make sure your subjects and verbs agree. It is so important. I made a whole video about it. So please make sure they agree right there. And then give a lot of details from the lecture. Now, don't try to put the reading in your own words. It's not your job to paraphrase here. There are other parts in the TOEFL when you paraphrase. This isn't one. Use the exact same words in the reading. It's fine. It's fine to repeat the lecture as well. Do not spend more than 20 seconds on the reading. And do not cross out notes during your preparation time. So you have 30 seconds to prepare. Some teachers will tell you to cross out notes, but I don't recommend that. You don't know what is important. I think that's just going to confuse you. I think you should spend your 30 seconds reviewing your notes. And then do not write notes you cannot understand, okay? You must understand your own notes. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our video about speaking 3. Now I'm going to make a totally separate video about grammar for this prompt. Because of the mistakes I've heard repeated over and over, I'm going to make a whole other video about it. So in the meantime, I'm Kathy from House of TOEFL. My website is www.houseoftoefl.com. And as always, good luck on your test and thank you for joining me for this short video.